The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base in San Diego as Captain Sarah Mitchell walked toward the briefing room. Her flight suit was perfectly pressed, her boots polished to a mirror shine, and her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. At 28, she was one of the youngest combat pilots in the Navy, but her record spoke louder than her age ever could. Sarah had earned her wings through sheer determination and countless hours of training. Growing up in a small farming town in Iowa, she had always dreamed of flying. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had filled her childhood with stories of aircraft and courage. When other girls her age were playing with dolls, Sarah was building model airplanes and reading aviation magazines. The path to becoming a Navy pilot had not been easy. She had faced skepticism, discrimination, and countless challenges that her male counterparts never encountered. During flight school, instructors had pushed her harder, expecting her to fail. Instead, she had graduated at the top of her class, earning the respect of even her harshest critics. Now, 3 years into her active duty, Sarah had completed 2 successful deployments. She had flown dangerous missions over hostile territory, provided close air support for ground troops, and earned several commendations for her skill and bravery. Her squadron mates called her Ice, not because she was cold, but because she remained calm under the most intense pressure. As Sarah entered the briefing room, she noticed it was unusually crowded. Besides her regular squadron members, there were several unfamiliar faces. These men looked different from the typical Navy personnel she was used to seeing. They were older, more weathered, with an intensity in their eyes that spoke of experiences far beyond normal military service. Commander Jake Reynolds, her squadron leader, stood at the front of the room with a serious expression. Next to him was a man Sarah had never seen before, but his bearing immediately identified him as someone important. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and scars that suggested a lifetime of combat. His uniform bore the insignia of a Navy SEAL commander. The SEAL commander introduced himself as Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Stone. His reputation preceded him throughout the Navy. Stone was a legend among Special Operations Forces, having led numerous high-risk missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other classified locations around the world. He had been awarded the Navy Cross, multiple Bronze Stars, and had earned the respect of every operator who had ever served under him. Stone's presence in their briefing room meant only one thing. Something big was about to happen. Commander Reynolds began the briefing by explaining that a joint operation was being planned. The details were classified, but it would require close cooperation between Navy SEALs and combat pilots. The mission would be dangerous, complex, and unlike anything most of them had ever attempted. As the briefing continued, Sarah learned that a high-value terrorist target had been located in a remote mountainous region. The terrain was treacherous, with limited landing zones and hostile forces throughout the area. The SEALs would need to be inserted quietly, conduct their operation, and be extracted under potentially heavy enemy fire. The success of the mission would depend entirely on the skill of the pilot chosen to support it. This pilot would need to navigate through dangerous terrain, possibly under enemy fire, and make precise landings in areas barely large enough for a helicopter. There would be no room for error, no second chances. Master Chief Stone stepped forward to address the room. His voice was deep and commanding, carrying the authority of someone who had faced death countless times and lived to tell about it. He explained that this mission was unlike typical air support operations. The pilot would essentially become part of a SEAL team, participating in planning sessions, understanding every detail of the operation, and potentially making split-second decisions that could determine the success or failure of the entire mission. Stone's eyes scanned the room, studying each pilot present. These were all experienced combat aviators, men who had proven themselves in battle. His gaze lingered on each face, evaluating, judging, measuring their potential for the task ahead. When his eyes reached Sarah, there was a momentary pause. She met his stare steadily, her expression calm and professional. Stone had worked with female support personnel before, but never in such a direct combat role. The nature of this mission would require the pilot to potentially operate in forward positions, possibly even on the ground if something went wrong. After what seemed like an eternity, Stone spoke again. His words were carefully measured, but his meaning was clear. He needed a pilot who could handle extreme stress, make instant decisions under fire, and work seamlessly with his team. This was not a mission for someone who might hesitate or second-guess themselves when lives were on the line. The Master Chief's preference was obvious. He wanted one of the male pilots, someone with extensive combat experience who could match the physical and mental demands of working with Navy SEALs. His reputation and the success of his missions were built on choosing the right people for the right jobs, and he had never worked with a female pilot in this capacity. Commander Reynolds presented the qualifications of each pilot present. Sarah's record was impressive by any standard. She had more flight hours than several of the men in the room, had completed more combat missions, and had received higher ratings in every category of pilot evaluation. Her aircraft handling skills were exceptional, and she had demonstrated remarkable composure under fire. Despite her qualifications, Sarah could sense the hesitation in the room. She had felt this before, the unspoken doubt about whether a woman could handle the most demanding military operations. It was a frustration she had learned to live with, but it never stopped stinging. Master Chief Stone asked detailed questions about each pilot's experience. He wanted to know about their most challenging missions, how they handled pressure, and their ability to adapt to changing circumstances. When he questioned Sarah, his tone was more skeptical than with the others. He asked about her physical conditioning, her ability to handle the psychological stress of potentially being shot down in enemy territory, and whether she could make the kind of life-or-death decisions that SEAL operations often required. Sarah answered each question directly and honestly. She described missions where she had flown through heavy anti-aircraft fire, times when she had made emergency landings in hostile territory, and situations where her quick thinking had saved the lives of ground troops. Her responses were factual, without boasting, but they painted a picture of a pilot who had consistently performed under the most challenging conditions. The other pilots in the room began to recognize what was happening. This was not just a briefing about a mission, it was an evaluation. Master Chief Stone was choosing his pilot, and despite Sarah's qualifications, his preference was becoming increasingly clear. Lieutenant Commander Mike Torres, one of Sarah's squadron mates, had served 2 deployments with her. He had seen her in action, watched her make impossible landings under fire, and witnessed her calm professionalism in situations that would rattle most pilots. He spoke up, vouching for her abilities and describing specific instances where her skill had been crucial to mission success. Other pilots joined in, sharing their own observations about Sarah's capabilities. They described her precision flying, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and her dedication to the mission above all else. It became clear that among her peers, there was no question about her qualifications. Master Chief Stone listened to these testimonials with growing interest. He had built his career on evaluating people quickly and accurately. The respect that these combat-experienced pilots showed for Sarah was significant. In the special operations community, respect was earned through performance, not given based on rank or politics. The briefing continued with technical details about the mission. Maps were displayed showing the target area, a remote compound nestled in a valley surrounded by steep mountains. The approach would require flying through narrow canyons, avoiding known anti-aircraft positions, and landing in an area barely large enough for a helicopter. Weather conditions would be challenging, with high winds and possible low visibility. The extraction might need to happen quickly, possibly under enemy fire. The pilot would need to coordinate not just with the SEAL team, but with other supporting aircraft and ground forces. As the technical aspects were discussed, it became evident that this mission would test every skill a pilot possessed. Navigation through difficult terrain, precision flying in confined spaces, the ability to adapt to changing conditions, and the mental toughness to perform under extreme stress would all be required. Sarah studied the maps and mission parameters with intense focus. She had flown in similar terrain before, understood the challenges, and began mentally planning her approach. Her questions were tactical and specific, demonstrating a deep understanding of the complexities involved. The meeting concluded with Master Chief Stone announcing that he would make his final decision within 24 hours. He would review all the pilot records, conduct additional interviews if necessary, and choose the aviator who would support his team. As the room emptied, Sarah remained behind, studying the mission materials more closely. She understood that despite her qualifications, she was fighting an uphill battle. Stone's preference for a male pilot was evident, and she knew that she would need to prove herself beyond any doubt. Commander Reynolds approached her as she gathered her materials. He had been her squadron leader for over a year and had developed tremendous respect for her abilities. He assured her that her qualifications spoke for themselves, but acknowledged that she faced challenges her male counterparts did not. The next 24 hours would determine whether Sarah would get the chance to prove herself on one of the most dangerous missions of her career. She had faced skepticism before and overcome it through performance. Now she would need to do so again, knowing that the lives of Navy SEALs would potentially depend on her skills. That evening, Sarah spent hours reviewing the mission parameters, studying the terrain, and planning potential approaches. She had learned long ago that preparation was her greatest weapon against doubt and discrimination. When given the opportunity to prove herself, she intended to be ready. The stakes had never been higher, and Sarah Mitchell was determined to show Master Chief Stone that the best pilot for his mission might not be who he expected. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching the tension that had settled over Naval Air Station North Island. Sarah arrived at the base earlier than usual, having spent most of the night reviewing mission parameters and terrain maps. She had memorized every detail of the target area, studied weather patterns for the region, and calculated fuel requirements for various scenarios. Master Chief Stone had scheduled individual interviews with each potential pilot. Sarah was scheduled for 1,000 hours, giving her time to complete her regular morning flight training. She took her F/A-18 Super Hornet through a series of precision maneuvers, practicing tight turns and low-altitude flying that would be similar to what the mission might require. Her aircraft responded like an extension of her own body. After thousands of flight hours, the connection between pilot and machine had become instinctive. She pushed the limits of both herself and the aircraft, knowing that perfection in training often meant survival in combat. After landing and completing her post-flight checks, Sarah made her way to the administrative building where the interviews were being conducted. She passed several of her fellow pilots in the hallway, men who nodded respectfully, but said little. Everyone understood what was at stake. The interview room was sparse and functional, containing only a table, several chairs, and a secure communication system. Master Chief Stone sat across from her, his weathered hands folded on the table. His expression was unreadable, the result of years spent making life-or-death decisions without revealing emotion. Stone began by reviewing her service record aloud. 2 deployments to the Middle East, 147 combat missions, 3 air-to-air kills, and numerous successful close air support operations. Her efficiency ratings were consistently in the top 5% of all Navy pilots. She had never failed to complete a mission and had never lost an aircraft to enemy action. Despite these impressive statistics, Stone's questions focused on areas where he had concerns. He asked about her physical strength, whether she could handle the equipment necessary if she needed to operate on the ground. He questioned her about survival training, her experience in prisoner-of-war scenarios, and her psychological evaluation scores. Sarah answered each question thoroughly and honestly. She had completed all required survival training, scoring higher than average in every category. Her psychological evaluations consistently showed exceptional stress tolerance and decision-making ability under pressure. When Stone asked about her physical conditioning, she mentioned that she regularly outperformed many male pilots in required fitness tests. The Master Chief then shifted to more specific tactical questions. He described hypothetical scenarios, situations where split-second decisions could determine mission success or failure. What would she do if the primary landing zone was compromised? How would she handle multiple anti-aircraft threats while trying to extract his team? What if weather conditions deteriorated beyond mission parameters? Each scenario was more challenging than the last, designed to test not just her technical knowledge, but her ability to think creatively under pressure. Sarah approached each problem methodically, explaining her reasoning and providing alternative solutions. Her answers demonstrated both extensive experience and the kind of innovative thinking that special operations required. Stone found himself impressed despite his initial reservations. Her responses showed a depth of understanding that went beyond textbook knowledge. She had clearly faced similar situations in real combat and had learned from each experience. The interview continued for over an hour, covering everything from technical aircraft capabilities to the psychological challenges of working with elite special operations forces. Stone explained that SEAL teams operated differently from regular military units. They relied on trust, instantaneous communication, and the ability of each team member to anticipate what others needed before being asked. Sarah listened carefully, asking intelligent questions that showed she understood the unique demands of special operations. She had worked with various ground units during her deployments and had developed an appreciation for the different mindset required for close-quarters combat operations. As the interview concluded, Stone made an unexpected request. He wanted her to participate in a practical evaluation that afternoon. She would fly a simulated mission profile, demonstrating her ability to navigate through challenging terrain while coordinating with ground forces. It would be conducted in a high-fidelity flight simulator that could replicate the exact conditions they might face. The practical evaluation was scheduled for 1,400 hours. Sarah spent her lunch break reviewing the simulator parameters and mission requirements. She knew this was likely her only chance to prove that she belonged on this mission. The flight simulator was one of the most advanced systems in the Navy, capable of replicating every aspect of combat flying with startling realism. The cockpit was identical to her regular aircraft, and the visual systems provided crystal-clear representations of terrain, weather, and enemy threats. Master Chief Stone observed from the control room, along with several members of his SEAL team who had been brought in to provide ground coordination during the simulation. These were men Sarah had never worked with before, experienced operators who had participated in dozens of real missions with various pilots. The simulated mission began with a night insertion through mountainous terrain. Sarah had to navigate using minimal lighting, avoiding simulated enemy radar positions, and coordinate with the SEAL team for landing zone preparation. The scenario was designed to be as realistic as possible, including radio interference, changing weather conditions, and unexpected enemy activity. From the beginning, Sarah demonstrated the skills that had made her one of the Navy's top-rated pilots. Her navigation was precise, her communication with the ground team was clear and professional, and she adapted quickly to changing conditions. When the simulation introduced an unexpected enemy anti-aircraft position, she immediately adjusted her approach without losing focus on the primary mission. The SEAL team members providing ground coordination began to take notice. Her radio calls were exactly what they needed to hear, clear, concise, and anticipating their requirements. She understood their tactical situation and provided support that enhanced rather than complicated their operations. Halfway through the simulation, the scenario became more challenging. Weather conditions deteriorated, forcing her to fly entirely on instruments through narrow mountain valleys. An emergency arose requiring immediate medical evacuation of a wounded SEAL team member. Sarah had to quickly recalculate her approach, coordinate with multiple aircraft, and execute a precision landing in marginal conditions. Her performance was flawless. She managed multiple priorities simultaneously, maintained constant communication with all relevant parties, and executed each maneuver with the precision that special operations demanded. When the simulation concluded, even the most skeptical observers had to acknowledge her exceptional capability. Master Chief Stone called a brief recess to discuss the evaluation with his team members. In the control room, the SEAL operators who had coordinated with Sarah during the simulation shared their impressions. They had worked with many pilots over the years, and her performance ranked among the very best they had seen. Petty Officer First Class Danny Rodriguez, Stone's communication specialist, commented that Sarah's radio discipline was perfect. She provided exactly the information they needed when they needed it, without unnecessary chatter or confusion. In combat, clear communication often meant the difference between success and disaster. Senior Chief Marcus Williams, the team's demolitions expert, noted her ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. When a simulation threw unexpected challenges at her, she had responded instantly with creative solutions. This kind of flexibility was essential for special operations, where no plan survived contact with reality unchanged. Stone listened to his team's feedback carefully. These men had worked with him for years, and their judgment was something he trusted completely. Their unanimous praise for Sarah's performance was significant, but he still had reservations about placing a female pilot in such a dangerous role. The evaluation continued with a second scenario, this one involving a daytime extraction under enemy fire. Sarah would need to coordinate with multiple friendly aircraft while navigating through active combat zones. The simulation included surface-to-air missile threats, enemy fighter aircraft, and the pressure of evacuating wounded personnel under time constraints. Once again, Sarah's performance exceeded expectations. She managed the complex tactical situation with remarkable composure, coordinating effectively with other aircraft while maintaining focus on her primary mission. Her threat assessment was accurate. Her evasive maneuvers were textbook perfect, and she successfully completed the extraction despite numerous simulated enemy attempts to prevent it. By the time the evaluation concluded, Stone found himself facing a dilemma he had not anticipated. Sarah Mitchell was clearly the most qualified pilot for this mission, but his personal reservations about working with a female aircrew remained. He had spent 25 years in special operations, building his reputation on choosing the right people for dangerous missions. His judgment had kept his team alive through countless operations. That evening, Stone met with his senior team members to discuss the final selection. The conversation took place in a secure conference room, away from other personnel who might be influenced by their decision. Present were Senior Chief Williams, Petty Officer Rodriguez, and Chief Petty Officer James Thompson, the team's medical specialist. Each man shared his assessment of the pilots they had observed. While all the candidates were highly qualified, Sarah's performance had stood out in multiple areas. Her technical skills were superior, her communication was more precise, and her ability to handle complex scenarios was exceptional. Chief Thompson pointed out something that others had noticed but not discussed. Sarah's decision-making process seemed to naturally account for the welfare of ground personnel. Her choices consistently prioritized the safety and success of a SEAL team, even when it might increase risk to herself. This kind of team-first mentality was exactly what special operations required. Stone acknowledged the quality of Sarah's performance, but expressed his concerns about the unknown factors of working with a female pilot in such a high-stakes environment. He had seen how the introduction of new variables could affect team dynamics, sometimes in ways that only became apparent under actual combat stress. Senior Chief Williams, a veteran of over 15 years in special operations, offered a different perspective. He reminded Stone that their job was to complete the mission successfully, not to make social or political statements. If Sarah Mitchell gave them the best chance of success, then personal comfort levels should not be the deciding factor. The discussion continued well into the evening, covering every aspect of the upcoming mission and how different pilot selections might affect the outcome. Stone's team had enormous respect for his judgment, but they also felt comfortable expressing their honest opinions about what they had observed. As the meeting concluded, Master Chief Stone announced that he would make his final decision by 0800 hours the following morning. The selected pilot would immediately begin intensive mission planning and coordination training with the SEAL team. There would be no time for second thoughts or adjustments once the choice was made. Stone spent that night reviewing every aspect of the evaluation, weighing his team's input against his own experience and instincts. He understood that this decision would not only affect the success of the upcoming mission, but could potentially influence future special operations policies regarding female aircrew participation. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did that night. As Stone prepared to make a choice that would test both his professional judgment and his personal convictions, dawn broke crisp and clear over the naval base as Master Chief Stone walked toward the briefing room where the announcement would be made. He had spent most of the night reviewing files, considering options, and weighing the advice of his trusted team members. The decision he was about to announce would set the course for one of the most challenging missions his unit had ever undertaken. Sarah arrived at the briefing room precisely on time, along with the other candidate pilots. Her expression remained calm and professional, but internally she felt the familiar tension that preceded any major announcement. She had given everything she had during the evaluation process, and now the decision was completely out of her hands. The room filled with personnel involved in the mission planning process. Besides the candidate pilots, there were intelligence specialists, logistics coordinators, and several officers from the Special Operations Command structure. The mission had grown in importance over the past few days, with additional resources being allocated and higher-level oversight being established. Commander Reynolds entered first, followed by Master Chief Stone and his senior team members. Stone carried a folder containing the mission details and his final pilot selection. His expression revealed nothing about the choice he had made, maintaining the same professional demeanor he had shown throughout the evaluation process. Stone began by thanking all the pilots for their participation in the selection process. He emphasized that each candidate had demonstrated exceptional skills and that the choice had been difficult. The mission they were about to undertake would require every skill a combat pilot possessed, and there was no margin for error. He then began describing the specific details of the operation that had been cleared for release to the selected pilot. The target was a high-value terrorist leader who had been located in a compound deep within mountainous terrain along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Intelligence indicated that he was planning a major attack against American interests and needed to be captured or eliminated before he could execute his plans. The compound was situated in a valley accessible only through narrow mountain passes. Approach routes were limited, and the enemy had established anti-aircraft positions throughout the area. Weather conditions were unpredictable, with frequent high winds and sudden storms that could make flying extremely dangerous. Stone explained that his SEAL team would be inserted under cover of darkness, conduct the operation, and require extraction within a limited time window. The pilot would need to remain in the area throughout the operation, ready to provide immediate support if the team encountered unexpected resistance or complications. The mission timeline was tight, with only 72 hours available for final preparations. The selected pilot would need to work closely with the SEAL team, participating in detailed planning sessions and rehearsals. There would be no time for the usual gradual integration process that typically preceded joint operations. After outlining these requirements, Stone paused and looked directly at Sarah. The silence in the room was complete, with everyone understanding that the announcement was about to be made. He opened the folder in front of him and removed a single sheet of paper. Master Chief Stone announced that Captain Sarah Mitchell had been selected to support the mission. The room remained quiet for several moments as the announcement settled in. Sarah felt a mixture of relief, pride, and apprehension. She had achieved what she had worked toward, but she also understood that the real test was just beginning. The men around her offered congratulations, but she could sense the underlying tension about how this unprecedented partnership would function under actual combat conditions. Commander Reynolds smiled and nodded approvingly. He had advocated for Sarah throughout the process and was pleased to see her qualifications properly recognized. The other candidate pilots accepted the decision professionally, understanding that Sarah's performance during the evaluation had clearly distinguished her as the best choice for this particular mission. Stone requested that Sarah remain after the general briefing concluded. As the room emptied, he found himself alone with the pilot who would soon be risking her life to support his team. The dynamic between them had shifted fundamentally. She was no longer a candidate to be evaluated, but a team member whose performance could determine whether his men came home alive. The Master Chief's first words to Sarah were simple and direct. He told her that his selection had been based purely on her demonstrated capabilities and her team's assessment of her performance. Personal reservations he might have had were secondary to his primary responsibility of ensuring mission success. He expected her to perform at the same level she had demonstrated during the evaluation process. Sarah responded with equal directness. She understood the significance of being chosen for this mission and the trust that Stone was placing in her abilities. She assured him that her performance would justify his confidence and that she would do everything necessary to ensure the safe completion of the operation. The conversation then shifted to practical matters. Sarah would immediately begin working with the SEAL team's intelligence specialist to understand every aspect of the target area. She would participate in mission planning sessions, contribute her expertise regarding aircraft capabilities and limitations, and help develop contingency plans for various scenarios. Over the next several hours, Sarah was introduced to each member of the SEAL team and briefed on their individual specialties and responsibilities. Senior Chief Williams, the explosives expert, explained how his team would breach the compound and the timing requirements for their operation. Petty Officer Rodriguez described the communication procedures they would use and the backup systems available if primary communications failed. Chief Thompson, the medical specialist, discussed casualty evacuation procedures and the equipment that would be available if team members were injured during the operation. Each specialist had specific requirements for air support, and Sarah needed to understand how her actions could facilitate or complicate their individual responsibilities. The intelligence briefing was comprehensive and sobering. The target compound contained not only the primary objective, but also an unknown number of armed guards and support personnel. Recent surveillance indicated increased activity in the area, suggesting that the terrorist leader might be preparing to move to a different location. Satellite imagery showed the compound's layout, defensive positions, and potential escape routes. The surrounding terrain was treacherous, with steep mountain slopes, narrow valleys, and limited areas suitable for helicopter operations. Weather reports indicated that conditions could change rapidly, potentially making extraction impossible during certain periods. Sarah studied these materials with intense focus, asking detailed questions about wind patterns, visibility conditions, and emergency landing zones. Her pilot's perspective on the terrain and weather challenges added valuable insights to the mission planning process. She identified potential problems that might not have been apparent to ground-oriented personnel and suggested modifications to improve the chances of success. As the planning session continued, the integration between Sarah and the SEAL team began to develop naturally. Her questions demonstrated that she understood their tactical requirements, and her suggestions showed that she was thinking beyond just her individual role to consider the mission as a whole. Senior Chief Williams commented privately to Stone that Sarah's approach reminded him of the best SEAL operators he had worked with, focused on the mission above all else, willing to acknowledge limitations, and constantly looking for ways to improve the overall plan. The day progressed with detailed rehearsals using scale models of the target compound and surrounding terrain. Sarah participated in these exercises, understanding how her aircraft positioning and timing would affect each phase of the operation. She identified several locations where she could provide overwatch support and outlined procedures for rapid extraction under different threat conditions. During a break in the planning session, Stone found himself observing Sarah's interactions with his team members. She had quickly established professional relationships with each specialist, asking appropriate questions and offering relevant suggestions. Her focus remained entirely on mission requirements rather than any concerns about acceptance or integration issues. Petty Officer Rodriguez mentioned to Stone that Sarah's communication style was exactly what they needed for this type of operation. She listened carefully, asked precise questions, and confirmed understanding before moving to the next topic. In combat situations, this kind of disciplined communication could prevent the misunderstandings that sometimes led to mission failure or friendly fire incidents. The evening concluded with a comprehensive mission briefing attended by senior officers from the Special Operations Command. Sarah presented her portion of the plan, describing aircraft capabilities, timing requirements, and contingency procedures. Her presentation was professional and thorough, addressing the concerns of commanders who would ultimately be responsible for authorizing the operation. Questions from the senior officers focused on risk assessment and mission flexibility. They wanted to understand how the team would adapt if conditions changed or if the intelligence proved to be inaccurate. Sarah's responses demonstrated that she had thought through various scenarios and was prepared to modify her approach as circumstances required. Following the formal briefing, Stone gathered his team for a private assessment of their readiness level. Each team member expressed confidence in the mission plan and in Sarah's ability to provide the air support they would need. The integration process had progressed more smoothly than anyone had anticipated, with Sarah quickly becoming a valued team member rather than an outsider trying to fit in. Stone acknowledged that his initial concerns about working with a female pilot had not materialized during the planning process. Sarah's performance had been consistently professional and mission-focused. However, he reminded his team that the real test would come under actual combat conditions, when stress levels were highest and there was no opportunity for second chances. The team spent their final evening reviewing personal equipment, testing communication systems, and conducting last-minute preparations. Sarah completed her own pre-flight preparations, ensuring that her aircraft was equipped and configured for the specific requirements of the mission. As she went through her equipment checklist, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From growing up in rural Iowa with dreams of flying, through the challenges of flight school, and the skepticism she had faced throughout her career, everything had led to this moment. Tomorrow, she would have the opportunity to prove that her selection had been correct. The weight of responsibility was significant, but it was a burden she was prepared to carry. The lives of highly trained Navy SEALs would depend on her skills, judgment, and ability to perform under the most challenging conditions imaginable. She had spent years preparing for exactly this type of mission, and she was determined to meet every expectation that Master Chief Stone and his team had placed on her abilities.